Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, September the 4th, 2025. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. This podcast covers the defending national champions who are also ranked number one in the country. I don't know. Is that good? Great show for you today. The Dean, Bill Kurelic, the Grand Poobah, Mark Porter. Not quite the week of intrigue on the recruiting scene that we had here last weekend, but we'll wrap up the lingering vibes from an incredible red carpet weekend, and we'll tease what's going on this weekend, a little less fervent. We'll bring in the Dean, Bill Kurelic, and Mark Porter, and we'll talk about what's going on with Ohio State recruiting and the team, etc. Bill, we were talking a little bit before the show today. Mother Nature must have known Ohio State was hosting so many recruits last weekend, because last weekend was picturesque Columbus weather. I'm not sure you can get a better day for a football game relative to the city of Columbus. It was just an impressive overall recruiting pageantry experience this weekend. Not quite as big of a deal in terms of list of recruits. Obviously, Texas versus Grambling. The host of the opponent has something to do with it. Still, there are guys there that we need to see, although they may not see as much sunshine. Bill, who do we need to focus on for this weekend? And we'll get into all the fun recruiting stuff we have to talk about after that.
Yeah, you mentioned great group of recruits, both in terms of numbers and in terms of quality. It was at Ohio State last weekend. You mentioned great weather. It was 70 degrees plus, sunny, just a Chamber of Commerce day here in Columbus last Saturday. So everything was spot on as far as last weekend. Not so much the case this weekend. Today in Columbus, as I look out, I see a drizzly day, at least right now. And it's supposed to be that way for the first half of the day. High of maybe 69. Tomorrow gets better, though. 80 and sunny today here in Columbus, but not quite like that. Forecast now for Saturday here in Columbus for the Grambling game is 70 degrees, but 50% chance of rain. So not quite the weather and not quite the visit list. In fact, not even remotely close to the visit list for this weekend. And you expect that when you're able to get all those tremendous players, quality, quantity, everything for the game against Texas, and then you follow up with a game against Grambling. And no offense to Grambling, but it's not Texas. It's just not going to happen 2 weeks in a row or even anything remotely close. But there are always going to be some recruits in the stadium for an Ohio State home game. And there are a couple interesting guys. I'll just hit on a couple of what I think are interesting guys. JT Garasi, he's a tight end out of New Jersey, Ramsey Don Bosco. That's a pretty darn good football school in New Jersey. And he has an Ohio State scholarship offer. And Ohio State obviously is not his only offer. He's got a pretty decent offer list. And Keenan Bailey, and he confirmed earlier this week that he would be at Ohio State this weekend. Alabama's offered him besides Ohio State, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, Colorado, Auburn, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Missouri. And then these are two interesting offers he has, Texas and Texas A&M. So again, pretty good tight end that is going to be visiting Ohio State this weekend. Then the other one's a little bit up Mark's wheelhouse, a little more. A kid from Massillon is visiting Ohio State this weekend. We've talked about in the past how most 2026 recruiting is done for Ohio State, except for possibly finding maybe a diamond in the rough that they didn't originally offer, or maybe flipping a guy. And this guy, who knows, maybe he comes into both categories. Preston Daisy, and I'm sure Mark is familiar with him, offensive lineman from Massillon, 6'5", about 280. He has committed to Toledo. He committed to Toledo on June 25th. And he has mostly MAC offers, but he is planning to visit Ohio State this weekend for the game. So I think that's kind of interesting that, you never know. We can get Mark's thoughts on Preston Daisy and kind of leading into something we'll talk about a little bit later. Some of the high state commitments, of course, will be at this game this weekend. And one of them is CJ Santa, the linebacker from Olentangy. And I will be out to see him in person on Friday night. Kind of pretty much a rivalry game. The schools are just a few miles apart. Olentangy is at Olentangy Orange. I live basically right across the street from Olentangy Orange High School almost. And I'll be at that game to see CJ Santa in person on Friday night.
Let's give congratulations where it's due. Doreen celebrating her 35th wedding anniversary. Talk about a W. That's impressive. 35 years. I think the Dean's got you beat on here. What are you at, Dean?
I got to beat a little bit. My wife and I celebrated our 40th anniversary this past July.
Okay, that's awesome. If you see my pen here, that's because I always have to do math for mine. So I think we've been past June, haven't we? So yeah, I'm on 26. How about you, Mark?
We are 20, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
So on this show, 40, 26,
22.
22.
Did you really just put me on the spot on a live podcast?
By the way,
could be a rough afternoon in the
I was gonna
port.
say, at best, I'll give you a C for that, and that was a kind grading.
I thought Preston
so
Daisy was going to be the blindsider of the day from Maslin Perry, but no, I got the blindsider from Dan. Woo.
Yeah, so we've been very
let's talk about Preston Daisy.
Look at this and look at that. By the way, let's also give congrats out here a little bit. We have talked up Mr. Sanchez quite a bit, and very cool to see him on the field as a true freshman. In fact, if you go back and watch the play that's gotten a lot of love from me and from everybody else, the play where they had Arvell Reese kind of turn his head, trigger the left tackle to back up and then attack. What really threw Arch Manning off on that was there was a weak side corner blitz from Devin Sanchez. So that was very cool. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
No, we brought up Preston Daisy from Maslin Perry High School. Had him in a system. I just checked his grade. I had him as like a solid multi-offer MAC kid, which is what he has. And I was going to say Mike Hallett, the offensive line coach at Toledo, is always on the cutting edge of offering offensive linemen. If there's a sophomore in Ohio that needs to be offered, he does it. He had Mike Vanderrood committed up at St. Ignatius. Pitt stole them from him. Him having this commit, it speaks highly of him because Mike does such a great job that a lot of bigger schools will go pick from his pool of offensive linemen because he gets on them so early. And in a place like Maslin Perry, they run the ball pretty well there. I could see this guy at 6'5", 280. Fitting the characteristics like Bill and I are saying. There's a pop-up guy or two senior year, kids that grow their senior year, kids that, get in the weight room over the summer and, they naturally progress. But I've been a big proponent of sophomore and freshman recruiting is crazy. Give these kids time to develop, give them time to bake, and you'll get a much better player. Jake Cook is the type of player that you're looking for. And Jake Cook has a black stripe removed already. And he went from not even being offered at this point in time to, fast forward, he's the guy. So you kind of have to do your homework. And, Ohio State has a big enough recruiting staff where they can put a bunch of kids and say, hey, we're going to watch senior tape. Even though we don't need anybody, we don't want to get blindsided by some big-time player popping up where he goes to the NFL in 3 or 4 years and everyone says, how are you guys getting paid all this money to do recruiting and you didn't know about them? So they flip stones. I mean, there's a lot of stones they flip you never hear about, but, names like this and Bill digging around, that's why we get to talk about it.
Bill, this is kind of a general comment. We didn't actually discuss this specifically, but it seems to me as recruiting is changing, and we have talked about this, they really have a type now that they're developing, or types at Ohio State that they're developing. And we discussed, I think I talked to you about this a little bit the other day when we were on the phone, like the Glenville pipeline, they're going to be focused on that. they've identified, when they identify a recruit who they believe is the total package and worth the effort. I don't want to say the word bidding war, but someone who would maybe fall into that category. As Bill said, there are 5 stars and there are 5 stars. Those types, I would put, for example, the running example, I would put Devin Sanchez into that category. One of them, though, I think that he's clearly been identified as Ohio offensive lineman. They are not going to get, I get the sense they really want to make sure they don't get burned on those. They've identified the fact that you need to get many young offensive linemen and develop them as much as they can. Do you see it like that going forward? Do you see them identifying guys like this? Your comments on that, Bill?
Well, they obviously want to keep all the Ohioans that they really want at home. They haven't, because of the NIL, they haven't been able to do that. We talked about McNutt, a lot about it. He had a package on the table, and as soon as I heard about it from Oregon, you can't turn that down. You just cannot turn that down, and he didn't. But offensive linemen, I think, get a little bit different breed. They really, really want to keep those offensive linemen in Ohio that they want, and they wanted 3 this recruiting cycle, and they got 2 of them. Those, of course, being Sam Greer and Maxwell Riley. Guthrie is going to Clemson, but I know they're very, very, very happy with getting Greer and Riley, and those guys, I think, are going to be cornerstone type guys for the Ohio State line in the future. So, I think offensive line, they're definitely they're going to do pretty much what they need to do to a certain level. They're not going to go crazy on it, but to keep those guys in state.
I actually talked to a GM about this not too long ago.
A GM.
Yeah, that's the new position, that everybody has. That they're.
So you're not talking about the NFL.
No, college GM, and it's a newly formed thing where recruiting coordinator's dead. We're going with the general manager because we're now dealing with salary cap duties, money, and now that the money's involved, he was talking about the evaluations are crucial coming out of high school, and I want to say they use a color code where if they evaluate you as a possible Heisman winner, a possible once every 5-year type of recruit, okay, they're going to pay you. That's like a purple, I guess, where if you see a kid on the board that has that color, and you're only going to see those every couple years, Jeremiah Smith, whoever it may be, okay, that's the superseder. And then you have a rung where you're trying to evaluate kids. Will these kids be future Big Ten kids? And then you have a rung, will they be starters? Then you have a rung, are they developmental? And you really, like Bill has done, there's 5 stars and there's 5 stars. You have to really be great at evaluating before these kids get there, because you're going to have to pay some of those upper tier guys and upset the apple cart. He was talking about, everyone says you can't pay a kid who's never done anything more than starters. Everyone knows that's just a locker room disaster, creates resentment, whatever. But you want good players. Do you want top 5 first-round draft picks? Do you want the ilk that comes with that? You're going to have to pay. And he was kind of saying there's no way to avoid that. Now, back to what I said, the group that's evaluating has to be masterful at really identifying, not just thinking, this kid's a generational kid, that kid's a generational kid, or you're going to be a disaster. You're going to be paying, Johnny Manziels to come in because you think you got your hands on something and you really don't. But talking to these GMs, this is really, that's why there's a GM, because it's an all-day conversation now about, what's this going to do if we pay this kid, and they're very aware they don't want to pay freshmen. I'll say that 100 times. They do not want to do it, But then when they don't do it, Brandon Baker goes here, Jordan Seaton goes here, Savion Hyder goes here. And you say, well, we might have to get in this game on that generational level.
And when I say they're not going to go crazy, Felix Ojo and what Texas Tech did, that's would be a reference there.
Yeah.
Bill, you've been around Ohio State for a good amount of time and covered a lot of high school kids coming to the team. Can you name for me right now guys at Ohio State who started as true freshmen?
There have been a few. The Big O, of course. But just play, there are not a lot of those guys that just walk right in and start the first game. Here's an interesting one for you, Dan. How about started his first game? It did not turn out well. Art Schleister.
There you go.
And it was Penn State and that at Penn State, and it didn't turn out well that game.
So look at this.
Archie
Look at
Griffin.
that. I'm saying, look at what you're asking for. Okay. Put Jeremiah Smith on there. Are those guys good at football? Come on, man. Those are generational players. Now, Katzenmoyer and Claret didn't develop into pros. Oh, I should read that out loud for those of you who are on the podcast. Orlando Pace, Las Vegas Buckeyes posted. Orlando Pace, Andy Katzenmoyer, Maurice Claret. I'm just trying to get across how. Go ahead.
See if this list is right, because I just pulled one up. Jeremiah Smith,
Yep.
JT Tumaloau,
No.
Travion Henderson,
No.
Denzel
Yeah,
Burke,
sort of.
J.K.
Yep.
Dobbins, Mike Brewster, Cameron Hayward, Malcolm Jenkins, Rob Sims, David Boston, Katzenmoyer, Spellman back in '89, and we can go back farther. Carlos Snow, Chris Spielman, Chris Carter, Art Schleister, Brian Bashnagel, Archie Griffin, and Mike Showalter. There you
Quite a
go.
list.
A long list for all that time.
Yeah,
So
I was
now-
gonna say that's not many guys. Like one every 3 years, kind of what I was saying. Like it's doesn't happen often.
My point is this: when you do bring the guy in there, it's not an issue because everybody knows if there was angst among Ohio State people or guys in the locker room or parents, and here's the thing: I'll guarantee there was some, at least behind closed doors, complaints about Jeremiah coming in and getting that money. That's ridiculous. There are obvious guys. I don't think I'm not going to have the Sanchez's reveal their GDP here, but you haven't heard a lot of complaints about Devin Sanchez because it's obvious. So I had an internship with the NBA many, many, many years ago. And here's what they were told. Do not get fooled by the outlier prospect. But if you miss on the outlier, you're fired. You know how many people tried to draft another Charles Barkley, another 6'5" guy that can rebound like that? There aren't any more guys like that. So I think we just need to chill on the finances. Now, here's what I found very interesting. We developed an intense love affair on here, and justifiably so, I'll say, for the high school tape of one Brandon Baker. Brandon did not have a great game against Ohio State. If you go back and look at, I'm pretty sure when CJ Hicks comes unblocked on the last play, that determining play, I'm pretty sure it's Baker who's supposed to have blocked him. So that's a cautionary tale. And look, they would have taken Brandon Baker. Bill, wouldn't you agree with that? That they really wanted him. So the idea that they didn't want Brandon Baker is inaccurate. It's just a challenge. So I think it's a reverse way of giving them some more credit. Mark, did you notice Mr. Baker there on the right side?
I noticed when he jumped off sides twice, which is a telltale sign of so many things. Once you're like, okay, but we'll throw in that it's loud. We'll throw in you can't hear things. But when you're that twitched up and you're that nervous, it's like the guy with his teeth chattering when it's cold. He was fearing who was coming, because if you're that twitched up to get your kick step on and get in the pass protection, you're feeling the heat of the Ohio State pass rush. That most tackles should sit in there comfortable and kick step out and not be on the edge of out of control. But when you're jumping off sides, you're kind of on the edge of out of control. But he did not, I would say, dominate the game in any way. But I would still take him. I'm not going to just bang on him, one game or whatever. But for as much hoopla and as much as we thought he was going to dominate, it really wasn't that storyline for him. And same with Arch Manning. I mean, I thought I did a Buckeye in the sky, and there's only a few people like me. I have seen more people break down Arch Manning on social media and rip him for things that they're really not that bad. I mean, the sky is falling in Texas for what they're doing. Thank God we didn't lose, because I wouldn't want to see that happen to our team right now, but they're being brutal on just a few plays. So we shouldn't really do that to Brandon Baker. But when you have that much money you're being paid, you're going to get the microscope.
Not to mention, if he's getting paid more than the guy who's backing him up, the whispers begin in the locker room. Starts in the stands with the parents and all the relatives they bring to the game. D will tell you, they chatter up there, man. I don't care what sporting event you're at. If you sit with the parents, I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're at a 9th grade girls JV volleyball game. There's some S being talked among the parents in the stands. That is human nature. Sean Duffy, one of our best, I believe. He's a Centerville guy, so he's Southwest Ohio. He's Gem City. I don't necessarily agree with this, but I'm curious to get everyone's opinion. Sean believes at Ohio State, running back is a position that I pay top dollar for. We never win a natty with second-tier running backs. I believe that's generally in reference to the current crew and Savion Hyder headed up north. Bill, your thoughts on that?
Well, when you look at the last 2 national championships, I will say there have been some pretty top-notch running backs. Ezekiel Elliott, as good as it gets, really, in my opinion. He was the complete running back, running the ball, blocking everything, and that was a national championship. And Claret before that, and then of course last year I wouldn't say they had an Ezekiel Elliott, definitely, certainly, but Henderson and Quinshon Judkins were awful good. So I think, I think there is some, I guess you'd say, proof to what, if you want to call it proof, to what he's saying. But, I don't know that the running backs are just not as the most important position on the field is quarterback, period.
We're in a salary cap era where when you do the pie chart in the NFL for what positions you're going to pay, running backs are guys coming off the couch, rushing for 100 yards. Your first guy goes down. The fantasy players all know it. Pick up the backup. He'll just go for the same amount of yards. But to the point of this, there are some guys that are truly elite in the NFL. There are some guys that are truly elite. In the past, you didn't have to worry about a salary cap and paying those guys. So it may be just a different environment where, yeah, you want to pay Hyder, bring him in, but if you pay him, nobody's blocking for him. Yeah, so it's going to be that push-pull where, yeah, the left tackle you guys all wanted, yeah, he's running in the backfield right now. His money's back there. So I get the point, and we all love that star, but sometimes the difference between that star and the next guy isn't worth the amount you're going to overpay for it. And you see that in the NFL. They run these guys, and they get to that contract year, and they let them go. They just don't want to tread on the tires. I'll just get another one out of college. It's got fresh feet, and we'll pay him, $1.4 million. We're not paying you $13 million. And I think that's what the going rate for the top running backs now is, $10-15 million in the NFL, where, yeah, we'll take the $2 million guy out of college, and we'll call it a day.
This year might be a test case too. I think could win the national championship, and I'm not putting down anybody on the roster right now because I think Donaldson played well, and I think Peoples is a good running back, and I do think Bo Jackson could be the next great one, but I don't think any of them this year are going to be remotely close to an Ezekiel Elliott or Claret or whatever. And Ohio State could win the national championship with that crew, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out this year.
Ryan Hanthorn. So how do we pay elite recruits and still maintain the roster? I get the fact that recruiting, it's fun to win the recruiting battles, but we kind of did just answer this. Here's who's going to get the money. Quarterbacks, okay? Quarterbacks and outlier recruits are always going to be in their own category. You can find an exception to the running back rule in the NFL. You can find an exception to any position rule in the NFL. But for the norm, for the usual, that's just not how it works. I loved Mayan Williams as a running back here. Mayan Williams, they got, who he's committed to Iowa State. There are just more running backs out there than there are left tackles. They made a movie called The Blind Side because there's so few physical types like this. It's not a reflection of how good anybody thinks the running backs are. It's the fact that there are just more of them. That's just facts.
The backup and third quarterback are getting paid more than some of the offensive linemen. That's how important it is. Yeah, just follow the money, and you'll see where the value, what you cannot be without to run a team.
Not high quality. Okay. Now I will say this. See, here's this. Bill, given what we're discussing here, I think they're making a legitimate attempt to attract David Gabriel Georges. I think what we're discovering here is it's kind of case by case. There is no rule. It's a talent game. And do you have the same fear about David Gabriel Georges that you had about Savion Hyder? I know you always kind of felt Hyder was going to be a bidding war. Do you get the sense with DGG?
Not necessarily yet, but he's a 2027 guy, so we're a long way off from that for him. But they are making a really strong effort to get. He's a top of the board guy, and they are making a strong effort to get him. And he likes Ohio State. Ohio State loves him. Has a great relationship with Carlos Lachlan. But is somebody going to step out, in 6 months or plus or whatever, and put an offer on the table to him that is just not going to be able to be matched by us? I don't know that right now. And I don't know what David Gabriel Georges would do in that case
right
at this point. So all I know is that Ohio State is absolutely very much in the running for him.
What may happen now is one of those really good running backs that's like truly elite off the charts, maybe at like New Mexico State right now. And when they see that Ohio State needs one to make their run in a year, like, the mercenary, I think that's how you attract that kid more so than maybe getting lucky and finding him or stumbling onto him. You kind of wait and see where he pops up and tell him, hey, you want to play for the number one spot in the country, you play here, or you can go play for, the 50th or 70th ranked team in the country.
Completely agree with that. There were a couple guys last year. If you go look at the Mississippi schools, I think Southern Miss and another one, both their freshmen came in, kicked butt, and both are at a bigger school now. Look, this is not an exact science, people. That's one thing to remember. I do think it's pretty clear Ohio State is doing things the right way right now. I get that everyone likes to win all the recruiting battles, but we shall see. All right, Marcus. Holy Nikes, dude. Now that is something. I've never even seen that.
There you go.
Good Lord. What are we doing here, guys? Oh, Doug. Yikes, Doug. I accidentally deleted you again. I'll get you back there, Doug, but that was worth it. All right. Sorry about that, gentlemen. Mark, you like to go to Ohio games and you bring your camera and that produces content. Can you please let us know what you're about to show us, and then I'll bring it up.
Yeah, bring lots of cameras. I went to Northwest Ohio to see Kellen Weimer, and I saw Cardinal Mooney versus Villa Angela St. Joseph for D'Angelo White. So we have film on both of those guys, and if you're an Ohio State fan, you need to know who these players are. They're your next generation Buckeyes. The first player is
if you could introduce each guy with name, kind of height, weight, vibe, etc.
Yeah, I'll pause this. So I'll get, we let these things play. And as we did Buckeye in the Sky the other day, I realized we could probably spend 10 minutes on a play if we really wanted to dive into some of this stuff. So I'll try to go a little slower this season than in the past. Kellen Weimer is from Liberty Center, Ohio. Offensive lineman. Went from having 0 offers this summer, Northwestern offered, and then it wasn't much longer where he had a list of about 11 or 12 offers, Ohio State being one of them. Listed at 6'4", about 265, and you see from these pictures, he's number 60. He's got that thin body. He's got that athletic body. That's him playing defensive end and pass rushing. And watch him here on this pass rush and chase. This isn't what he's going to be doing in college, but offensive linemen usually don't do that type of stuff, have that type of bend and acceleration to chase. What they do have is first play of the game, you're going to drive someone 20 yards down the field for me, and your team's going to score a touchdown. He did against lesser competition what he is supposed to do. That's always the knock. Oh, he plays for a smaller school. I never buy into that. Talent shows up wherever. You just have to do the competition, what you're supposed to do. And he ragdolls kids, which is what you should do to smaller kids. He is a finisher. He drives his feet. I think he could play all 5 offensive line spots. I think he could play center. He did that last year. You see him pull out there in pass protection and ragdoll a kid. He can kick step. I would give him a shot at left tackle. And maybe it's because he's a little bit lighter right now, maybe 270 or so or under, but he's got a flat belly. You can see that the way he's running around. I don't want to call him a glorified tight end. He's, such a flat belly, but the feet and that type of stuff, he comes from that type of ilk. We have a couple more plays. We'll probably get to D'Angelo White for a play or two, and I'm sure you'll, pull the plug on this. But
by the way, Mark, Ohio State is recruiting him as a guy that can play anywhere on the offensive line.
And I agree with that. D'Angelo White, does that look like your future NFL body right there? I mean, if that was Antonio Gates who played basketball, I would be whatever. That was Ricky Dudley. He did a nice job. He has a couple plays coming right into the camera where you can see the type of speed he has for that body. I think he lights up like a Christmas tree when he gets the ball in his hand. I mean, he really accelerates, and you can see the receiver skills and why his coach would call him the second coming of a Travis Kelce type. You could see the makings of that. In the run game, he's a work in progress. I talked on the last podcast. Every now and then he knocks one down the middle, and every now and then he doesn't quite get the center punch he wants. He maybe gets a shoulder pad, and he'll have to fight to stay on balance. But the upside of him, if you can see him in person, he makes a one-handed catch on this film where he jumps out of the stadium to go get it. Like, if he was going to go dunk a basketball, he is up higher than he would dunk a basketball, and he just rips this ball out of the air. So you're going to want to see the rest of this tape. I even have his big catches from the week before at Walnut Ridge. So, yeah, check out the premium stuff on these 2 players.
He's a stud. There are certain guys, we just talked about this. It's funny. There are certain guys that just look the part, that are just blessed genetically. He's one of them. Bigger, stronger, faster, whatever. He's probably been that since he's a little kid. But also, D'Angelo White, again, that's a pro name right there. I'm serious. I have a belief in this. When you name your son, if you're lucky enough to have one, he has to pass what I call the Yankees third base test, where if they announce his name, now at third base, DJ Porter, that works.
Yes.
That sounds good. When you have a last name like Ruben, you got to mix up the first names to make him sound a little more athletic. Trust me. There's a reason my first kid is named Darren. All right. Let's hit some questions here. There's a bunch of them. Let's talk about, did you guys get a chance to see the new quarterback at Michigan, Mr. Underwood, and what your thoughts were, Bill? And also, Bill, hold on a sec. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you put in context also if Ohio State recruited him, how that went, blah, blah, blah?
I did not get to see that. I did not see, other than a few highlights on TV, I did not see any of that game. So I can't really speak a lot on that. That game was after Ohio State's game against Texas. And believe me, I was working very hard on all the gazillion recruits that were in Ohio Stadium on Saturday afternoon. So I did not watch much of any football the rest of that evening and into Sunday and all. So I can't really make too much of a comment at all on how Underwood looked in that game. I can talk about his recruitment. Ohio State did offer him and all that and recruited him, but that was never, in my mind, a situation where the player was likely going to Ohio State, and he didn't.
Marcus?
I did watch the highlights, and I did have a few Michigan people assert to me their belief that he is generational, that they nailed it, that he is the truth. I would be careful to give any of those labels after a team of lesser ilk than you, the way Michigan. And you know what? Julian Sayin is going to do the same thing for the next couple weeks. He is going to look like the next coming of, I don't want to say Jesus Christ, but yeah, I mean, these next couple weeks, he could throw 7 touchdown passes each week.
Easily.
Pad the stats. The running backs could have 3 or 4 touchdowns and the inflation. So that's maybe what's going on with Bryce Underwood. Yeah, he can walk on water. There you go. But you got to be careful of that in the preseason. You really do. And I think it's good for confidence. You want your team to go in and feel that, like I hit one out of the park. But it's not a true hit one out of the park type feel, because when you go to these tougher teams like Texas, we just played a game where you throw everything out of the window to win that game. I don't care if Jeremiah Smith does have 4 catches for 40 yards. If we win, so what? Let them criticize it. Let them say they shut us down. Let them say that they embarrassed him. I don't care. That's how you play big games. You slog through it and throw whatever out the window. I don't care what completion percentage are. I just, so these other games, you start to think, oh, statistics, and I'm a dominator. So be careful, Michigan. But Bryce Underwood does have legitimate talent. I'm not going to dog him.
Oh, it jumps off the tape. You can't deny that.
Yeah.
Takes a lot more than that.
Under pressure is where you're going to find out. When your brain is stressed out, playing fast, loud stadium, behind the chains, that's when you find out who you really are. A lot of people look good right now.
And I'll say this, in those situations, it's nice to be able to throw the ball to elite receivers. Michigan does not have elite receivers, so I'll just leave it at that. Yes, Rick, we agree. New Mexico, fine place to visit. Not sure it's a football factory that you want to open up with. Speaking of which, let's talk about that now. Bill, do you have any vibes on the big game of this weekend? The spotlight will shift to Mr. Underwood as Michigan heads to face Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma is, in my opinion, the poster child for the transfer portal right now, because if you guys remember last year, they had a rough season. Pretty good on defense, not on offense, so their quarterback transferred, and they brought in John Mateer, who is now the apple of everyone's eye on the transfer market. Pretty sure I listened to the Cover 3 podcast that 24/7 Sports and CBS does. A couple of those guys picked them for the Heisman, I think. And so now Michigan goes out and faces them. Bill, do you have any thoughts on that game? That's going to be the marquee game of this weekend as your Buckeyes host Grambling.
My biggest thought is I'm going to have time to watch it, and I'm looking forward to watching it because, as we talked about, there's not a huge and dominant group of prospects visiting Ohio State this weekend, so my workload will be less. I'll still be working and covering the game, and then, as I said, Friday night I'm going to go to see the Olentangy Orange game, and then next week we'll have our usual. This weekend, into next week, our usual coverage here of Bucknuts, and I'll be working on all that. But it won't be like last weekend, so I'm going to get to sit down on Saturday night and watch that Michigan at Oklahoma game. And I think what makes it more interesting to me is that it's at Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that'll make it more interesting. And I'm just looking forward to seeing it and to see, what can you tell from Michigan's win last weekend? To me, not a lot. What they do this weekend, I think we'll be able to tell more about where Michigan is really at.
Marcus?
Yeah, I see the line here is 5.5, and Michigan's the underdog, which you get 3 points for just being at home, so it's probably a pretty fair fight. I think the quarterback from Oklahoma, just reading about him, he may be the show. He may outshine Underwood, and and in his home stadium, that's probably the narrative they want to go behind. I would like to see Michigan take a little chop in the face, after. We don't want to see them coming in full steam. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma here, but I don't have any certain expertise on the college football landscape of why.
It'll develop.
Yeah.
All right, let's let everyone know what you're up to for the weekend. William, you already teased it.
Yep, I will be walking almost across the street to see CJ Santa. I'm looking forward to it, and it'll be Ohio State has the linebacker commitments in Sincere Johnson and CJ Santa. I saw Sincere Johnson last Friday night, and this weekend I will see the other Ohio linebacker commitment for the Buckeyes, CJ Santa. And then we'll be having a report on that Sunday, Monday, that game, along with all the live updates from the game itself on Friday night.
My wife told me I need to be less expressive on the podcast, and this is signs. I'm not good at that. All right, Mark, take it. Your thoughts? Where you headed this weekend? I'm sorry, sir.
That's okay. I'm going to pay homage to Mason Wilt, the offensive lineman from St. Clairsville that has the Ohio State offer. I so proudly saw him a couple years ago as a freshman without pads. Last year, my wife saw him and got the pictures. So this year, I'm going to make the trip down and check out on his progress. Since the last time I saw him, he has literally blown up in the weight room and as a prospect. I think there's going to be a good game talking to him. I think there'll be a game that I get some competitive film. I think last week St. Clairsville dominated so much they didn't really need him, and I think he really beat the people. I want to say did very well in 10 plays. It sounds like. So if he does that for me, I should have some great highlights from the Bucknutters next week.
All right, people. I think there'll be a little less stress around this weekend's game. And I want to echo what Mark said earlier about winning the game. If you don't watch this game with a roster handy and are not one of those people who knows Ohio State's roster by heart, you may have a challenge at determining who's out there, because I do think that they were particularly conservative this past weekend in terms of who played and who didn't. It was also probably showed in their offensive approach. I do not think you're going to see that same conservative approach to personnel or offense this weekend. Grambling is going to face the brunt of this. And yes, Grambling is not without talent, but the idea that Grambling could come in here and match Ohio State player for player after about the first two series, that's asking a whole lot of Grambling. We shall see. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Have a good one, Nutters.